Today we're diving into a topic that affects millions of people but is so often surrounded by shame and judgment: addiction. But here's the thing, we're not going to talk about it as some kind of moral failing. Instead, we're going to look at it for what it is: a fascinating and, fixable feature of how our brains are wired.
So let's just start with that big question. When you hear the word addiction, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Whatever it is, I want you to just kind of set that aside for the next few minutes. Let's start fresh. Now get this. This idea right here, it changes everything. It completely shifts the conversation away from willpower and weakness and puts it right where it actually belongs, inside the brain. It's about neuroscience.
Okay, so to really understand how this all works, we have to look under the hood a little bit, at our brain's basic operating system. So let's start by uncovering the secret behind something we all want every single day: pleasure.
All right, meet the main character in our story, dopamine. Now, you've probably heard it called the pleasure chemical, but honestly, a much better way to think of it is as the motivation chemical. Its whole job is to get you to repeat actions that are good for you. It's your brain's way of saying, hey, that was good, let's do that again.
And this isn't some abstract science thing. It's happening to you all day long. When you eat an amazing meal, you connect with your friends, or you're scrolling through social media and see something you like. That little buzz of satisfaction, yep, that's dopamine, pushing you to keep going.
So far, so good, right? I mean, this system is designed to keep us alive and motivated. But this exact same system can be hijacked, and that can lead us straight into what we can call the dopamine trap.
You see, this really elegant biological system, the one designed for our survival, it has a blind spot, a vulnerability. And certain behaviors and substances, well, they can exploit that vulnerability, pushing the whole system way past its limits. And that is where the trouble starts. This right here, this illustrates the problem perfectly. On the left, you see the normal, healthy hit of dopamine you get from everyday stuff. Think of it like a gentle wave. But on the right, that's the release from an addictive habit. That's not a wave, that's a tsunami. And our brains just weren't built to handle that kind of flood over and over again. So what happens when your brain gets slammed by that tsunami again and again? Well, it does what it's good at. It adapts. The dopamine receptors, they start to become less sensitive. And what that means is those gentle waves of normal pleasure, like a walk outside or a good conversation, they just don't register anymore. The brain now needs that tsunami just to feel normal. And this whole chemical recalibration, it creates this really powerful self-perpetuating loop, a trap that can feel absolutely impossible to escape from. So let's break down exactly how this vicious cycle works.
It all kicks off with an intense craving, which is really just a biological demand for that dopamine tsunami. This leads to the action, doing the thing. And for a moment, yeah, there's temporary relief. The brain gets what it's screaming for. But that's almost always followed by guilt and shame, which creates stress. And guess what that stress does? It triggers the craving all over again. And it is so important to get this neurological loop. It's not picky. It really doesn't care what the trigger is. The exact same brain mechanics are at play, whether we're talking about substances, doom-scrolling social media for hours, or compulsive gaming. Anything that gives it that unnaturally massive dopamine hit. So if you can see that powerful cycle for what it really is, a biological process, it leads us to maybe the most important and empowering realization in this entire thing. Breaking this cycle, it has very, very little to do with just trying harder or having more willpower. Let's just let that sink in for a second. This idea right here is a total game changer. It reframes the entire issue. It's not a moral failure, it's a hardware problem. You're not fighting against yourself, you're working with a brain that has been, for a while, rewired to want something intensely.
And hey, if it's a wiring problem, you know what that means? It means it can be rewired. Our brains are incredibly adaptable. So let's talk about the path forward. Let's talk about that first real step toward freedom.
This is the big, hopeful question, isn't it? If my brain is stuck in this loop, and it's not about just gritting my teeth, then what do I actually do? How can a pattern like this possibly be changed? Well, the answer starts with something that sounds almost too simple, but I promise you it's the absolute foundation for any real change. It's just one word: awareness. Just understanding the cycle we walked through, that is the first giant leap. The moment you can see a craving not as some personal failure, but just as a predictable signal from your brain, you can start to detach from it. Awareness gives you the power to look at the machine without being controlled by it.
At the end of the day, this whole thing isn't about fighting your brain. It's about understanding it so you can start to work with it. Knowing how the system works is the key to changing the system. So, the question I'll leave you with is this. Are you ready to understand your brain?